Let's welcome in TSN Hockey Insider, one half of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. His busiest week, trade deadline. Hello to you, and I understand you are hearing things on Brock Besser. What's the latest there, Dregs?
Well, I think it goes in line with what most teams are thinking of when they've got expiring contracts and they've had, negotiation discussions, but nothing that is progressed or come to fruition. And in Brock's case, it's very similar to that. And there has been a lot of reporting on this. We know that Besser was offered what I think the team would describe as a good contract in the first half of the regular season. I think that there was some back and forth around that contract offer, but it wasn't substantial enough or didn't sway the Besser side to sign the extension. So that brings us to where we're at now, and just days away from the trade deadline. The fact that that deal, I believe, isn't on the table anymore. And then from Besser's perspective, he's probably saying, well, that's fine, because the deal that we were considering isn't on the table anymore either. So what does that leave you with if you're Patrick Allvin? And that leaves you with a tough decision. You either, now have to consider Brock Besser as an own rental with the playoffs looming and the hope and the belief that if you do that, that he's going to be an impactful piece in the playoffs, or you embrace what you've got in exploring your trade possibilities. And we don't have an answer to that yet, other than we know that Allvin and Jamie Rutherford continue to be in tune and having conversations with clubs about the possibility of trade. They just haven't made a decision yet as to whether or not that's what they're going to do.
So no final offer coming, no last and best offer coming from the Canucks, as you see it?
I believe that the offer that was made is no longer valid. There's nothing on the table, but that can change, right? I mean, if all of a sudden there's a shift in direction or change of heart, it does feel like a bit of a stretch right now. So what I mean by it can change, if they decide that the value of Brock Besser, even though his production's down a bit, is meaningful post-deadline, well, then, yeah, I suppose the opportunity to revisit any past contract negotiations and extension talks is valid, but it doesn't feel that way right now. And, again, I'm sure Allvin is busy with, the teams that are calling and also revisiting probably some of the conversations that he's had with general managers looking for a forward.
I realize agents don't like to have this point reinforced, but the sentiment does sort of just feel, Darren, like he would give a hometown discount. He will leave some money on the table versus especially an AFP assessment of 9.3 over 7 years. Like, if that's par, it sounds like he's willing to give a hometown discount here to the Canucks.
I don't know that. Probably. I know he and you guys watch the Canucks games very, very closely. I mean, some players are impacted by the conversations that go around them, right? And their families. And there is a sense that, Brock Besser is impacted. His game is influenced negatively based on all the ongoing speculation, everything that's gone into this season. And he's one of those players, because he's a team-first guy, that even when he's not directly or personally involved in what's going on, it still impacts and influences you, right? And we know that there's been enough drama around the Vancouver Canucks this year. There's been so much of it. And I think that even by being in proximity of some of that, it's impacted his play. So to go as far as to say that I think he'd take a hometown discount, I think that there was a time when he was willing to consider that. Maybe that time is now behind him. But again, you always have to qualify, man. If they decide not to trade him, then all bets are off. And maybe there is opportunity, if things go well, for Besser and for the Vancouver Canucks to rekindle this romance.
The optics of trading him or even letting him walk, though, Dregs, also doesn't look good for the Vancouver Canucks right now. This is a team that is bereft in offense right now, while there's sound reasoning to be concerned about the back half of any long-term contract with Besser, really good reasoning to be wary of that. There's no guarantee on the free agent market or the trade market that you replace the goals of Brock Besser.
And that's the challenge, right? And that's why it's so difficult to make trades that matter, hockey trades. Like we always say, oh, he wants to make a hockey trade. Well, everybody wants to make a hockey trade. And it sounds nonsensical to frame it that way. But how many times do you see, especially around the trade deadline, where players like that are dealt and players and general managers will pay a premium for a rental piece like Brock Besser? Well, Vancouver's not interested in the rental market. They're really not. And Vancouver needs players to come back and be impactful players. No different than the Buffalo Sabres. And it feels like we almost want to go all the way back to Buffalo in their connection with Vancouver. And the reason that, those trades didn't happen back in October is because Buffalo needed players that, are going to come back, that are going to be difference makers for the Sabres. Well, that's where Vancouver's in a different stratosphere than the Buffalo Sabres. But because of the offense that can be generated by Brock Besser when he's clicking the way that he does, it can't be futures and it can't be draft picks. It's got to be better than that.
We just showed your tweet about Buffalo, so just big moves, huh? That's all Kevin Adams wants to make is big moves, not in the selling business, or at least the rental selling business. He wants to do something significant here.
Well, I know he's been offered, and I think I tweeted this, that was included in the tweet, something like, numerous offers and strong offers. Well, by strong offers, you're talking about first-round draft picks that have been thrown at Kevin Adams and the Buffalo Sabres for, of course, Dylan Cousins, Bo Byram, maybe throw Alex Tuck into that mix. I know some are speculating on Peterka and what direction the club might want to go with him, being that there's a contract scenario that needs to play out. And Adams just continues to affirm, look, we need players. We don't need draft picks. We don't need prospects. We're good on both fronts. We need players who are going to step into this lineup and make us better now and make us really good moving forward. And that's a challenge, especially when you're willing to part with the players that we're talking about in Buffalo here again. I mean, these are 3 high-quality players. Why would you be willing to trade those to either a contending team or any team, for that matter, unless they're willing to give you quality assets back? And so far that has materialized.
Okay, if the Canucks are not in the rental business, that means they're looking for players with term. Safe to assume center iceman Dregs after the Miller trade?
Yeah, probably, and that's a challenge. Well, not probably. They're most definitely looking for a centerman, absolutely. What level of centerman are we talking about now, right? And everybody's swirling around Scotty Lawton now, the Philadelphia Flyers, because conventional wisdom tells us with the St. Louis Blues just a point back of the Western Conference playoff cut line. Does it make sense that Doug Armstrong is going to trade his captain, Braden Shen? Probably not, unless somebody blows his doors off. And I know the ask for Braden Shen from some clubs was enormous, as it should be. I mean, again, all the assets that Braden Shen is going to deliver. But I'm reminded, too, that St. Louis is a smallish market. So that playoff revenue makes a big difference to ownership of the St. Louis Blues. So I don't think you're going to see Armstrong selling. So that shifts the market a little bit to center ice. So now Danny Briere can probably get a first-round pick or something equivalent plus for Scott Lawton. But what I'm mindful of is the conversations that I'm sure Patrick Allvin has had with general managers around the league, that didn't start in the last week or two. Maybe they started in the offseason. And players that we're not speculating on, centers that maybe are available in the right scenario. And I'm not going to mention any team or mention any names because I just don't know that. I've heard some stuff that Vancouver most definitely is targeting centers that we haven't speculated on. They're not on trade bait lists. So we'll see if that pans out. But most definitely they're looking for a centerman.
But that's a Pettersson exchange then, you would think, to extract somebody? No,
I don't think so. No. Well, and again, if there's a way to unload Elias Pettersson, sure, you do it. Absolutely. But it probably seems more likely that whatever return you're going to get for Petey is going to be better in the offseason. And then that's the belief of those close to Pettersson as well, is that they don't think he's going to be traded between now and Friday. Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. No, I mean, I think you're looking at other pieces. Could Carson Soucy be involved? He's got the no move clause. It's got to be that plus, depending on the player in question here. But it would make sense if it's a team that is real close in the East to the playoff line, that maybe doesn't have depth at center, but may have something that's close and would like to add, some other pieces, maybe a depth forward. Maybe it's Carson Soucy again, who's going to manage this process if he's traded because of the no move, that sort of scenario.
Well, I mean, that's the narrow path to success here for the Vancouver Canucks, is if they don't have to give up Pettersson in order to bring back a decent center here, guys.
Right.
Does that give you the leash to give Pettersson one more kick at the can in the fall? Does that give you the peace of mind that you do have another skilled center that you can lean on for some of the offense? Again, we don't know who this guy is. No. I don't know who we're talking about here, but in concept, that's the one way to do that.
I don't know how Darren feels about it, but Scott Lawton does not change the price.
No,
for me.
it wouldn't. It would have to be bigger than Scott Lawton. No, but as he said, somebody off the trade bait.
And of course, we got 20 some games here left and potentially playoffs. So I think they have time. I think it's probably wise to use it, unless, as Darren says, somebody blows their socks off by Friday and they feel like, okay, we have to make this move. You mentioned Soucy, Dregs. Where do things stand with Carson Soucy?
Yeah, status quo. I mean, he's, again, I reference the trade bait graphics because everybody has them, and his name is on every single one, right? I think that there was some dialogue with Carson and his camp probably 10 days, 2 weeks ago. And the belief was that, they were expecting that there'd be a trade scenario that would unfold. Now, it's Monday as we're having this conversation. Plenty of time between now and 3 o'clock Eastern on Friday. But what gums it up a little bit is that no move clause, of course, and the fact that he's got a young family. And I think it's been relatively quiet from the initial gesture of maybe having that conversation a couple of weeks ago to where we're at right now. And that's what makes it really challenging, I think, for some players. And I would be that player. If I had a no move clause and maybe I wasn't a perfect fit anymore with the club, I mean, I might get a bit ornery, to be fair, especially days leading up to the trade deadline, unless it's a scenario whereby, okay, you're going to a team that maybe you're a better fit on, and maybe you feel like your opportunity is better to contend for a Stanley Cup than what you're seeing in Vancouver. So there's lots of reasons competitively for the player to consider it, but now just a few days outside of the trade deadline, and that being relatively quiet between Soucy and Canucks management, not so sure how it'll play out.
But players like Soucy are built for the deadline. Like that is your prototypical deadline acquisition.
Absolutely. And I'm not surprised. A lot of players and agents view it as contract renegotiation and going back on your word. And by the letter of the law, they're not wrong on that. So your understanding, Dregs, if the Canucks find a trade fit, they are going to bring it to Soucy and see what he says. They don't have a list of teams he would accept a trade to.
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. And I do, and I'm not throwing either side under the bus. I just think that everything that's gone on around the Vancouver Canucks, it's just, they went through their process a couple of weeks ago, and now all of a sudden it's quiet. And that might, look, the defense market is pretty thin here, guys. Let's be honest, especially for depth defensemen. There's not a lot available. That can and probably will change because, again, multiple calls this morning and several managers just telling me, look, we don't even know what the market is. It hasn't been fully defined just yet, which sounds bonkers with the trade deadline around the corner. But again, just look at both conferences and the playoff matchups that are still very much in play here. So I can appreciate that, but it's going to have to change. And when you've got a no-move clause, it gets more complicated.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at the defensemen who have moved: Seth Jones, Marcus Pettersson, Will Borgen, Cody Ceci. So, we have seen a ton of movement already on the defense market prior to the deadline.
Yeah, not a big. Are you seeing the Ceci price range in terms of what Soucy brings back? Do you think?
I would think so. And by the way, that was a sneaky good ad by the Dallas Stars, and not just Cody Ceci, but to get that package deal with Mikael Granlund as well. I mean, Jimmy Nill deserves a ton of credit there. And there's lots of speculation as to whether or not Dallas is done here yet, right? They've got the cap space with Tyler Seguin and Mira Heiskanen. But yeah, I would think that would be fair in comparing Cody Ceci and Carson Soucy, but I'm not the general manager that's going to put it all together, so it doesn't matter what I think when it comes to the value of the player. The value will be determined between now and 3 o'clock Eastern, when all of a sudden, and that's what happens too, right? You're willing to offer a draft pick 4 days prior to the deadline, whatever, a lower end draft pick, because you think that that's what that defenseman warrants. And then all of a sudden you strike out 2-3 times and you're like, hey, Winnipeg, use Winnipeg as an example. Winnipeg can be a tough sell, even though they're, arguably the best team in the National Hockey League right now. Well, Cheveldayoff runs into this every single year, where it's a no-move clause, it's a no-trade clause. For whatever reason, despite the fact that they've been perennial contenders, guys just won't waive to go to Winnipeg. So you go, you've got your whiteboard and you've got 5 names on it, and all of a sudden you get to wherever the player is on that list. You're like, all right, well, I better give up the draft pick or I'm going to be empty-handed. That happens every single year across the league.
Just lastly, Dregs, there was a little bit of rumblings last week on Derek Forbort here. Forbort, Pius Suter, their other UFAs. Are you hearing anything with regards to extension talks there, or do you think they could be on the move?
Well, potentially, sure. I think there's low-level conversations, but that would be part of just doing your management duties, right? Knowing what the parameters are of a deal that the player is looking for, term, money, and all of that, and then you take that back into whatever situation room that you've been developing at home or on the road. And if the trade interest outweighs what you think the potential of the player is on a shorter term extension, then that's a decision you make. But I don't think there's anything front burner.
But just to underline this, that you've heard the same. The Vancouver Canucks want to make the playoffs more than get assets this week.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the sense I'm getting. But they're going to have to be creative, because I said earlier in the program here, they don't want to be aggressive in the rental market. But, again, if there aren't fair hockey trades that are upgrading certain positions, let's just play the what if game here for a moment. What if, the situation we talked about where they're having conversations about a center iceman that isn't on a trade bait board, but that doesn't come to fruition. And Scotty Lawton goes to the Toronto Maple Leafs, or he goes to Winnipeg, or he goes somewhere else. Oh, Brock Nelson isn't available because Lou Lamoriello decides that he's keeping him as his own rental. All of a sudden now, if you're Vancouver, you have a defined need at center ice. So all of a sudden you start to look a little bit more creatively at certain options.
Well, it should be a fascinating week here for the Canucks and for the league at large, particularly since we haven't got into it, but Rantanen? Darren, what do you think? Chances of Mikko Rantanen moving for a second time here this trade season?
I think they're slim to none. Slim to none, Matt. And, good source with the Carolina Hurricanes yesterday shared with me that, look, again, it's age old. We should almost put this qualifier banner across all networks. Unless someone blows our doors off, we're not trading this player. And that's position the Carolina Hurricanes. They're willing to gamble, and it's a considerable gamble. Most people think Rantanen's going to go to free agency, but Carolina believes that they're a contending team, and the extra time available to them after Friday might give them enough of a runway to convince Mikko Rantanen and his significant other that Carolina is a nice place to build a family.
Well, we'll see if there are any Godfather offers between now and Friday, and we look forward to watching Jimmy and the crew tap dance.
Yeah.
as we wait things out.
Yes. Good luck on Friday, sir.
On Friday, good
Yes.
luck. I hope you're not involved with anything involving a primate or reindeer games.
Thanks, Dregs.
Thanks, guys.